It was an ordinary night in Altadena until the fire came. At first, it was just a faint glow on the horizon, but within hours, it had transformed the quiet neighborhood into a sea of flames. The sky turned an eerie red, and the sound of sirens mixed with the crackling of fire filled the air. Emily was exhausted after another grueling shift at the hospital. As she sat down to catch her breath, her phone began to vibrate relentlessly. She ignored it at first, assuming it was another work-related issue. But when it rang for the fourth time, she reluctantly picked it up. The voice on the other end stopped her heart. "Mom!" Liam's voice trembled, barely audible over the chaos in the background. "You have to come home. The fire is everywhere. Grandpa's still inside." Her pulse quickened as she tried to comprehend his words. "What do you mean he's still inside? Why didn't you leave together? He said he couldn't leave without the box," Liam cried. "He's looking for it now." The box. Emily's mind raced. The box that had always been off-limits, locked away, its contents a mystery. She had asked her father about it countless times, but his response was always the same. "It's something I have to protect, no matter what." And now, he was risking his life for it. Emily's exhaustion evaporated, replaced by a surge of adrenaline. Her father had always been the strongest person she knew, the one who had held their family together after her mother's death. And yet, here he was, putting himself in danger for reasons she couldn't understand. She tried to steady her breathing, but her thoughts were a whirlwind. Why would he risk everything for that box? What could possibly be so important? As she grabbed her keys and headed to her car, one question lingered in her mind. Was the secret her father had been protecting worth their lives? What Emily didn't know was that the answer to that question would change everything she thought she knew about her family. Before we dive deeper into this story of love, sacrifice, and shocking revelations, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to HeartStories. Stay with us to uncover the truth behind the fire, the box, and the secret that turned a family's world upside down. Before the fire tore through Altadena, the cracks in Emily and Victor's relationship had already begun to show. Their bond, once strong and unshakable, had been strained over the years by unspoken resentment and a growing emotional distance. Victor had always been the foundation of the family. After Emily's mother passed away when she was just a baby, he devoted his life to raising her. But as Emily grew older, her ambition to build a stable future for her own son, Liam, often clashed with Victor's vision of what truly mattered in life. The argument began, as it often did, over dinner the night before the fire. Liam had been unusually quiet, picking at his food while Emily scrolled through emails on her phone. Victor sat across the table, his gaze heavy with disapproval. "Emily," Victor began, his voice calm but firm, "do you even notice that Liam barely touches his dinner anymore? Or that he looks at you for attention, only to see your face buried in that phone?" Emily looked up, startled. "Dad, I'm handling work. You know how demanding it is right now." "Demanding?" Victor's voice rose slightly. "What's demanding is being a single mother and raising a child who feels invisible. You think you're building a future for him? But you're missing his present. One day, Emily, you'll look back and regret all the moments you weren't there." Emily's cheeks flushed with frustration. "Do you think I have a choice? Do you think I want to work these hours? Everything I'm doing is for Liam, for his education, for his future. I'm doing what I have to do." Victor leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. "You think money is going to fix everything? You're so focused on what you can give him tomorrow that you're forgetting what he needs today. A child doesn't need more things, he needs his mother." The room fell silent except for the clinking of Liam's fork against his plate. Emily took a deep breath, trying to suppress the anger rising in her chest. "Dad," she said slowly, "you don't understand what it's like to raise a child in today's world. It's not the same as when I was growing up. Things are harder now." Victor's voice softened, but his words carried the weight of decades of experience. "No, Emily. What's harder is growing up without feeling seen. I know because I've been there. When your mother died, I didn't have the luxury of being absent. I had to be there for you, even when it hurt, even when I didn't know how. And I'm telling you now, you're slipping away from your son." Emily's hands tightened into fists under the table. "You think I'm failing him?" she snapped, her voice breaking slightly. "You think I don't love my own child? That's not fair, Dad." Victor's expression softened, and for a moment, his frustration gave way to sadness. "I'm not saying you don't love him, Emily. I'm saying that love isn't enough if it isn't felt. He needs to feel it, every day, in the little moments. Not through promises of a better future, but through your presence right now." The words cut deeper than Emily wanted to admit. She pushed her chair back abruptly, muttering, "I can't do this right now." As she walked away, Victor's gaze lingered on her retreating figure. He sighed and turned his attention to Liam, who was still quietly sitting at the table. "Liam, come here," Victor said, motioning for the boy to sit beside him. "I know your mom works a lot, but don't ever think she doesn't love you. She's just trying to do what she thinks is best." Liam nodded slowly, his small shoulders sagging under the weight of the tension he couldn't fully understand. "I know, Grandpa, but I miss her sometimes." Victor placed a comforting hand on Liam's shoulder. "She'll figure it out. Kiddo, sometimes people just need time to see what really matters." That night, Victor sat alone in the living room, the old wooden box resting on his lap. He traced its edges with his fingers, lost in thought. This box had been his anchor for years, holding the pieces of his past that he couldn't bring himself to let go of. As he opened the box and stared at the familiar contents, a faded photograph, a few letters, and a wedding ring, he whispered to himself, "Emily needs to understand that family isn't about what you leave behind. It's about what you hold on to while you're still here." But Victor didn't know that time was running out. The fire would come, and with it, the chance to bridge the distance between father and daughter would hang by a thread, and the secret he had guarded for decades would no longer stay hidden. The fire started as a faint glow on the horizon, barely noticeable in the distance. But within hours, it transformed into a roaring inferno, consuming everything in its path. The residents of Altadena scrambled to evacuate as thick plumes of smoke choked the air, and flames devoured homes, trees, and memories. Victor stood on the porch, staring at the approaching blaze. The orange-red glow reflected in his eyes as he tightened his grip on the box in his hands. Inside that box lay decades of memories, secrets, and the last connection he had to the past he had fought so hard to protect. Liam tugged at his grandfather's sleeve, his small voice trembling with fear. "Grandpa, we have to go. The fire's getting closer." Victor knelt down, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Liam, listen to me. I need you to be brave and go to the car. I'll be right behind you." But Liam shook his head, his eyes welling with tears. "No. Grandpa, you have to come with me now. Please." Victor hesitated, looking past the boy at the flames inching closer. He knew he couldn't leave without ensuring that the box, the key to everything, was safe. He had promised himself that he would protect it, no matter the cost. "I'll be quick," Victor said firmly, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Go to the car and wait for me. I promise I'll be right there." Reluctantly, Liam nodded and ran toward the car parked at the end of the driveway. He turned back repeatedly, watching his grandfather disappear into the house. Inside, the air was already thick with smoke, and the heat was unbearable. Victor moved quickly, navigating the familiar layout of the home he had lived in for decades. The walls that had once held family photos were now scorched and cracking. He coughed as he pushed open the door to the living room, where the wooden box had fallen amidst the panic. He found it lying on the floor, its lid slightly ajar. He bent down, picking it up carefully, and glanced at the contents inside. A photograph of Emily's mother, a handful of letters, and a ring glinted faintly in the dim light. "You're coming with me," Victor muttered under his breath as he clutched the box tightly. Just as he turned to leave, a loud crack echoed through the house. A burning beam from the ceiling crashed to the floor, narrowly missing him. The flames licked closer, and the room grew hotter by the second. Victor's mind raced. He had promised Liam he would be quick, but time was running out faster than he had anticipated. The fire had moved too quickly, cutting off the path he had taken to get inside. Outside, Liam was frantic. He stood by the car, calling out for his grandfather, his voice hoarse from yelling. "Grandpa, where are you? Please come out." At that moment, Emily's car screeched to a halt in front of the house. She jumped out, her heart pounding as she saw the flames consuming their home. She spotted Liam and ran to him, her voice filled with panic. "Liam, are you okay? Where's Grandpa?" Liam pointed to the house, tears streaming down his face. "He's inside." He went back for the box. "Mom, he said he'd come out." "But he hasn't." Emily felt her stomach drop. Her father was in there, risking his life for a box she had never been allowed to touch, a box that had always been shrouded in secrecy. She looked at the house, then at her son. She knew what she had to do. "Stay here," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the fear gripping her. "Don't move. I'll get him out." Liam grabbed her arm, his small fingers digging into her skin. "Mom." "No, it's too dangerous." But Emily shook her head. "I have to. Liam, Grandpa needs me." Without another word, she turned and ran toward the burning house. The heat hit her like a wall as she stepped inside, covering her mouth with the sleeve of her jacket to block out the thick smoke. "Dad?" she called out, her voice muffled by the roaring flames. "Where are you?" Victor's voice came from the living room, weak and strained. "Emily? Over here." She followed the sound, dodging falling debris and choking back coughs. When she found him, he was leaning against the wall, the box still clutched tightly in his hands. "Dad, we have to go now," she said, grabbing his arm. Victor shook his head, his face pale. "The box, I couldn't leave it behind." Emily looked at him, tears streaming down her face. "It's not worth your life." "Dad, please, we have to go." Reluctantly, Victor allowed her to help him up. Together, they navigated their way through the smoke-filled house, the flames growing more intense with every step. Emily could feel the heat searing her skin, but she pushed forward, determined to get her father out safely. Finally, they burst through the front door, collapsing onto the grass outside. Liam ran to them, throwing his arms around both of them as tears of relief streamed down his face. "You're okay? You're both okay," he cried. Victor coughed, his grip on the box still unrelenting. Emily looked at him, her emotions a whirlwind of anger, relief, and confusion. "Dad," she said, her voice trembling, "what's in that box that's so important you'd risk your life for it?" Victor didn't answer immediately. He held the box close, his eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and resolve. "It's time you knew the truth." "Emily?" he said finally. Everything I've kept from you is inside this box." As the fire raged behind them, Emily stared at her father, knowing that whatever was in that box was about to change everything. She thought she knew about her family. The flames roared louder as Emily crouched in the doorway, gasping for breath. The thick smoke clawed at her lungs, and the oppressive heat felt as if it might melt her skin. She had faced challenges in her life, but nothing had prepared her for this. "Dad!" she screamed, her voice barely audible over the crackling fire. "Where are you?" "Emily." The response came from deeper inside the house, faint but distinct. She pressed forward, every step a battle against the suffocating air and the growing chaos. The house she had grown up in, filled with years of memories, was now an inferno. Furniture crackled as flames devoured them, and the walls groaned under the pressure of the heat. "Dad, keep talking! I'm coming!" she shouted, her voice tinged with desperation. "Over here!" Victor's voice broke through the smoke again, weaker this time. Emily's heart raced as she pushed through the living room doorway, shielding her face with her arm. In the far corner, partially obscured by smoke, she saw him, Victor, slumped against the wall, clutching the wooden box to his chest like a lifeline. She hurried to his side, dropping to her knees beside him. "Dad, are you okay?" Victor coughed violently, his face pale and streaked with soot. He tried to speak but only managed a hoarse whisper. "I couldn't leave it. I couldn't leave her." Emily glanced at the box, then back at her father. "It's not worth your life." "Dad, we have to get out of here now." Victor shook his head weakly. "You don't understand this box, it's everything." I promised her. I promised. Emily grabbed his arm firmly, her voice breaking. You promised her, but you also promised us. Dad! Liam and I need you. You can't do this to us. Victor looked into her eyes, tears welling up as the weight of her words sank in. Slowly, he nodded. Okay, help me up. With one arm around his shoulder and the other gripping his wrist, Emily heaved Victor to his feet. He swayed unsteadily, but she held him upright. Come on, Dad, she urged, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. We're getting out of here. As they moved toward the door, the floor beneath them groaned ominously. Emily's heart sank as she realized the structure was moments away from collapsing. We have to move faster, she shouted, half dragging Victor toward the exit. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the house, followed by a deafening crash. Emily turned just in time to see part of the ceiling give way, sending fiery debris tumbling to the ground. One of the beams narrowly missed them, landing inches away with a thud that shook the floor. Victor stumbled, the impact almost knocking him off balance. Emily tightened her grip on him, her adrenaline surging. We're almost there. Dad! Just a little further. The air was thick with smoke, and Emily's lungs burned with every breath. Her legs felt like they might give out at any moment, but she refused to stop. The doorway was just ahead, a faint outline through the swirling haze. Liam's waiting for us, she reminded Victor, her voice a lifeline. We're almost there. As they reached the threshold, another explosion from deeper within the house sent a shockwave of heat and ash toward them. Emily shielded Victor with her body, staggering but refusing to let go. Finally, they burst through the doorway and stumbled onto the grass outside. Cool air rushed over them, a stark contrast to the inferno they had just escaped. Emily collapsed to her knees, still supporting Victor as he leaned against her, coughing violently. Mama? Grandpa? Liam's voice cut through the haze as he ran toward them, tears streaming down his face. He flung his arms around both of them, sobbing uncontrollably. You're okay, Liam cried, his voice shaking. I thought you wouldn't make it. Emily wrapped one arm around her son, holding him tightly as relief washed over her. She looked down at Victor, who was still clutching the box with trembling hands. Dad, she said softly, her voice a mix of anger and concern. What's in that box that's worth all of this? What could possibly be so important? Victor didn't answer immediately. He looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and determination. Then, with great effort, he held the box out toward her. It's time you knew, he said, his voice barely more than a whisper. Everything I've hidden is in here. Emily hesitated, her heart pounding. She took the box from his hands, her fingers brushing against its worn surface. The weight of it felt heavier than she had expected, as if it carried not just objects, but years of untold stories and secrets. She glanced at Liam, who was staring at the box with wide, curious eyes, then back at Victor. What's inside? She asked, her voice trembling. Victor coughed again, wincing as he struggled to sit upright. Open it, he said simply. Emily hesitated for a moment before slowly lifting the lid. The contents inside made her breath catch in her throat. There, nestled among the letters and photographs, was a faded picture of her mother, standing beside a man she had never seen before. The man's arm was wrapped around her mother's shoulders, and the smile on his face was unmistakable. Emily's hands shook as she lifted the photograph, her mind racing. She looked at Victor, her voice barely audible. Who is this? Victor's eyes glistened with unshed tears as he met her gaze. That, he said softly, is your father. Emily froze, the words hitting her like a thunderbolt. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Her entire world seemed to tilt as she tried to process what she had just heard. You're not my father? She finally whispered, her voice cracking. Victor reached out, placing a hand over hers. I may not be your father by blood, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. But I've been your father in every way that matters, and I always will be. Tears streamed down Emily's face as she looked at the man who had raised her, the man who had risked everything to protect her and her family. Despite the revelations, one thing was clear. Victor's love for her was unshakable. As the fire continued to rage in the background, Emily clutched the photograph tightly, knowing that the truth inside the box was only the beginning of a much deeper story. Emily stared at the faded photograph, her fingers trembling as she traced the faces of her mother and the stranger standing beside her. The man's arm was wrapped around her mother's shoulders, his smile warm and familiar, yet completely unknown to her. She felt as though the ground beneath her had shifted, leaving her unsteady and unsure. "Who is this?" she whispered, her voice breaking the heavy silence that had settled between them. Victor looked at her with eyes full of regret and pain, his shoulders slumping as though the weight of the years was finally catching up to him. "Emily," he began, his voice hoarse and weak. "That man in the photo, he's your father." The words hit her like a tidal wave, leaving her breathless. "What do you mean?" "You're my father," she said, her tone laced with desperation. Victor shook his head slowly. "Not by blood," he admitted. "I've always been your father in every way that matters, but I'm not the man who gave you life." Emily's heart raced as she tried to process the revelation. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you keep this from me all these years?" Victor sighed deeply, his gaze falling to the wooden box still clutched in her lap. "Because I was afraid, Emily. I was afraid you'd look at me differently, that you'd think less of me. I didn't want you to feel abandoned or unwanted. Your mother and I, we made a choice to protect you." Emily's voice grew sharper, her emotions bubbling to the surface. "Protect me from what? From the truth? Did he even know about me?" Victor hesitated, his silence answering her question. Emily felt a pang of anger mixed with sadness. "So he just left? He didn't care?" Victor shook his head. "It wasn't that simple. Your mother and he, they were young, and their relationship wasn't stable. When she told him she was pregnant, he panicked. He wasn't ready to be a father, and your mother knew she couldn't rely on him. That's when she turned to me." Emily's breath caught. "Turned to you?" Victor nodded, his expression softening. "Your mother and I were friends for years. I loved her, Emily. I always did, even when she didn't feel the same way. When she needed help, I didn't hesitate. I told her I'd be there for her and for you, no matter what. And when you were born, it was the happiest day of my life. You became my world." Tears streamed down Emily's face as she listened, torn between anger at the deception and gratitude for the man who had raised her. "You should have told me. Dad, I deserved to know." Victor reached for her hand, his grip surprisingly firm despite his frailty. "I know. Emily, I wanted to tell you so many times, but I was scared. Scared that knowing the truth would make you feel like less, or that you'd think I wasn't enough. I thought I was protecting you." Emily shook her head, wiping her tears. "You didn't need to protect me from the truth. I don't care about blood. You're my father. And you've always been enough. But this secret has been hanging over you, hasn't it? That's why the box was so important." Victor nodded. "It's not just the photo, Emily. There are letters in there. Letters from your mother, things she wanted you to know but didn't get the chance to tell you. I kept them because I wasn't ready to let go of her. She trusted me to take care of you, and I didn't want to fail her." Emily opened the box again, her hands trembling as she pulled out the bundle of letters tied together with a faded ribbon. The first one was addressed to her, written in her mother's delicate handwriting. "My dearest Emily, if you're reading this, it means you're old enough to understand the choices I made. I want you to know that you were conceived in love, even if your father wasn't ready to be a part of our lives. Victor stepped in when I needed him most, and he became the best father anyone could ever hope for. You are loved more than you will ever know, by both of us, in our own ways. Never doubt that you are enough, just as you are." Emily's tears fell freely as she read the words, her mother's voice coming alive through the ink on the page. She turned to Victor, her voice thick with emotion. "She loved you, didn't she?" Victor smiled faintly, his eyes glistening. "She did, in her own way, but her heart was complicated. She wanted to give you the best life possible, and she knew that meant letting go of the past and building something new. We were happy, even if it wasn't perfect." Emily clutched the letter to her chest, feeling a surge of love and appreciation for the man before her. "Thank you, Dad. Thank you for everything you've done for me. For Liam, I'm sorry if I ever made you feel unappreciated." Victor shook his head, a tear slipping down his cheek. "You never did. Emily, you've always been my daughter, and nothing will ever change that. As the fire continued to smolder in the background, Emily felt a weight lift from her chest. The truth, though painful, had brought them closer. The secrets Victor had carried for decades no longer stood between them. She looked at her son, Liam, who was watching them with wide eyes. "Liam," she said softly, pulling him into her arms. "Family isn't about who you're born to. It's about who's there for you, who loves you unconditionally. Your grandpa's the best example of that." Liam nodded, his small arms wrapping around both of them. "I know, Mom. Grandpa's the best." Victor chuckled weakly, the sound filled with both relief and joy. "That's all I ever wanted to be." In that moment, as they sat together on the grass with the box of secrets between them, Emily realized that the fire hadn't destroyed what mattered most. If anything, it had burned away the barriers that had kept them from fully understanding and appreciating one another. As the first light of dawn broke through the smoky sky, Emily knew they would rebuild, not just their home, but their relationships, stronger than ever before. Because family wasn't about perfection, it was about love, sacrifice, and the courage to face the truth together. The first rays of dawn broke through the smoky haze, painting the sky in hues of gold and orange. The fire had finally been contained, leaving behind a path of destruction and ash. But amidst the ruins, something unshakable remained, a family that had been fractured, now finding its way back to wholeness. Emily sat with Victor and Liam on the charred grass outside what was once their home. The air was heavy with the lingering scent of smoke, but the tension between them had lifted. The wooden box, its surface scorched but intact, rested between them. It was no longer a symbol of secrecy, but of the truths they had faced together. Victor broke the silence first, his voice quiet but steady. "I spent so many years trying to protect you. Emily, I thought that if I kept the past buried, you'd never have to carry its weight. But now I see I was wrong." Emily looked at her father, her expression soft yet resolute. "You weren't wrong, Dad. You did what you thought was best, and I know now that it came from a place of love. But secrets, no matter how well-intentioned, have a way of building walls. I don't want any more walls between us." Victor nodded slowly, his weathered face showing a mix of relief and regret. "Neither do I. I should have trusted you with the truth long ago. Your mother believed in your strength, and so should I have." Liam, who had been quietly listening, spoke up, his young voice cutting through the stillness. "Grandpa, are you okay now? You don't have to keep any more secrets, right?" Victor smiled, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. "No more secrets, kiddo. From now on, everything's out in the open." Emily reached for Liam's hand, squeezing it gently. "Liam, do you know what makes our family so special?" she asked. The boy tilted his head, thinking, "Because we love each other?" Emily nodded. "That's right. Family isn't about who we're born to. It's about who shows up for us, who stays, and who loves us no matter what. Your grandpa has shown us that, over and over again." Victor chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I just did what anyone would have done." "No, Dad," Emily said firmly, her voice tinged with emotion. "Not everyone would have stepped in the way you did. You gave me a home, a family, and love when you didn't have to. That's extraordinary." Victor looked down at the box, his fingers tracing its edges. "Your mother was the extraordinary one. She taught me what it meant to love unconditionally, to put someone else's needs above your own. I just tried to live up to her example." Emily placed a hand on his shoulder. "And you did, Dad. You've more than lived up to it." For a moment, the three of them sat in silence, the weight of the night's events settling over them. The devastation around them was undeniable, but so was the resilience that bound them together. "Mom," Liam said suddenly, breaking the silence, "are we going to be okay? Without the house and everything?" Emily pulled him into her arms, kissing the top of his head. "Yes, sweetheart, we'll be okay. A house is just a building. What makes it a home is the people in it, and as long as we have each other, we'll always have a home." Victor cleared his throat, drawing their attention. "There's something else I need to tell you." "Emily," he said, his tone serious. Emily raised an eyebrow, bracing herself. "What is it? Dad?" Victor hesitated, then gestured to the box. "Inside, there's a letter your mother wrote. It's addressed to both of us. I never opened it because I wasn't ready, but I think it's time we read it together." Emily's breath caught in her throat as she reached into the box and pulled out the letter. The envelope was worn and yellowed with age, her mother's handwriting scrawled neatly across the front. With trembling hands, she opened it and began to read aloud. "To my loves, Victor and Emily, if you're reading this, it means the time has come for the truth to be shared. I want you both to know how deeply I love you. Victor, you stepped into a role that many would have run from, and you did it with grace and strength. You've been more than a father to Emily. You've been her hero. Emily, my beautiful girl, I hope you know that you were born from love. Even if it was complicated, life isn't always perfect, but it's the imperfections that make it real and meaningful. I want you both to hold on to each other, because together, you're stronger than anything life can throw at you. Victor, thank you for keeping our family together. Emily, never forget that you're enough, just as you are. All my love, Mom." Emily's voice cracked as she finished the letter, tears streaming down her face. She looked at Victor, who was silently weeping, and reached out to take his hand. "She knew," Emily whispered. "She knew we'd need this moment to bring us back together." Victor nodded, his grip on her hand tightening. "She always knew what was best for us." Liam crawled into his mother's lap, wrapping his small arms around both her and Victor. "I think Grandma would be really proud of us," he said softly. Emily smiled through her tears, pressing a kiss to Liam's forehead. "I think she would be, too." Victor took a deep breath, his expression resolute. "We've lost a lot tonight, but we haven't lost what matters most. As long as we have each other, we can rebuild. We'll make a new home, together." Emily nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. "And this time, no more secrets. We'll build a home filled with love and honesty, just like Mom would have wanted." As the sun climbed higher, illuminating the scorched earth around them, Emily felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The fire had taken so much, but it had also given them something priceless: the chance to heal, to forgive, and to move forward as a family. Because in the end, family wasn't about the walls that burned down. It was about the bonds that could never be broken. "Together," Victor said, his voice steady, "we'll rise from these ashes." Conclusion. As the day unfolded, the smoke began to clear, revealing the true scope of the devastation. But for Emily, Victor, and Liam, the ashes were not just a reminder of what they had lost. They were a symbol of what they had gained. The three of them stood together, looking out at what was left of their home. It was hard to imagine rebuilding, but Emily knew that their foundation had never been the walls of the house. It had always been the strength of their love for one another. Victor placed a hand on Emily's shoulder, his voice steady yet filled with emotion. "We've been through the fire, and we've come out stronger. Your mother would be proud of us. Emily, proud of the family we've built together." Emily nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "We'll rebuild, Dad, not just the house, but everything that matters. And this time, we'll do it together." Liam looked up at both of them, his young face filled with determination. "Can I help? I want to make our new home the best one ever." Victor chuckled, ruffling the boy's hair. "Of course, kiddo. With all of us working together, we can do anything." Emily turned to her father, a soft smile on her face. "No more secrets, right?" Victor smiled back, his eyes glistening with tears. "No more secrets. From here on out, it's all about honesty, love, and family." As the sun rose higher, Emily took one last look at the ashes of their home. She wasn't afraid anymore. The fire may have destroyed the building, but it had strengthened their bond. They had faced the flames together, and now they would rise together. Life is full of unexpected challenges, but the strongest families are the ones who face them together. It's not the walls of a house that make a home. It's the people who fill it with love, sacrifice, and forgiveness. What does family mean to you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to HeartStories for more heartfelt tales. Together, let's celebrate the power of love and resilience.